Hey everybody, Riot Mort here with Riot Statikk as well, and we are here for the patch 11.1 Postmortem, the final patch of TFT Fates. We did it, we made it, Statikk.
The most game-breaking patch ever, with the most changes ever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's awesome. We're finally here.
nice. So, how are you feeling generally about the state alive right now?
I mean, I think we landed it pretty well. The balance state got to a pretty good point near the end. I think there was a lot of hiccups along the way, obviously. And although it's not perfect, and which we'll go into talk about here, I think we're having a send off. I think is probably a positive thing for some of these champions who we're not going to see in the mid set expansion. So
Yeah, I think it's interesting that if you looked at the data, which we finally looked at, earlier this week, the data looks really good, but
yeah,
perception not quite as good. I'd say we've definitely had some vocal challenger players about the perception, so it's gonna be one of those things. I think looking back, that we'll have to really take a close look at it, like why perception and reality are so different in this particular patch. So
yeah, that's going to be really interesting to look at for sure.
cool. All right, let's go over the actual changes. Cycling through the boards with hotkeys now skips dead players. This just seems like a win.
Yay!
Yay. Easy
It's funny.
cheesy.
I feel like actually now that it's in, I feel like I do it less. I don't know why.
Yeah, I actually haven't heard many people like comment on the fact that it changed. So it's interesting, but yeah.
Yeah, I think part of it's also like right now I'm playing a lot of PvE, so it's like I don't have time to like do all this scouting. I'm just trying to figure out what I'm doing right now with all the new units and things. It's just
Yeah.
too hard. Too hard.
So maybe we'll hear the positives in like a month when everyone has figured out 4.5.
Or they'll just assume this was always in the game and they'll be like they won't give us any.
Yeah.
They won't remember that this was patched out.
Which that is a good change, right? Right? If they never remember
Yeah,
it existed. So,
good.
all right, on
Sometimes
Vayne.
quiet is that.
Yeah. On the Vayne side, we nerfed Vayne 3 a little bit. 10 whole damage. Woo!
Pew pew. Yeah, I mean, in the data as we saw it back, she was actually still really performing a lot better than all the other one costs. But I think it was probably a good change to notch her down a bit. And she's obviously one of the characters that we're saying goodbye to. So I think letting her be, strong in the last patch was not the worst thing ever. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think this was the right amount of change for this champion. That way they could still succeed. I'm glad we didn't do something like 5 off the 2-star or something crazy like that. So this was good.
yeah,
Hecarim 3, the big Hecarim 3 buff. Unless I'm crazy, this did nothing.
yeah, I think yeah, it did nothing. I'm pretty sure. I didn't hear anybody playing this. I think part of it maybe is that as we may have suspected, there's so many ways to counter tanks, especially like a sustained tank like Hecarim, through anti-healing or, kicking him off the map with Lee Sin or, whatever else counters we have to tanks these in this set. It didn't really ever like become that mega tank. It was weird though because I remember, Mark, do you remember like at the beginning of our playtests,
Yep.
he was rocking it. But I know some of it was like we had different chosen iterations in than we have now on the live. But he was like a scary horse.
Yeah. I feel like Hecarim is one of those champions, not as bad as like Xin Zhao by any means, but one of those champions that never really succeeded in this set. But I could totally see coming back as a reprint in a different set and ending up actually being really strong and really powerful. Like there's nothing fundamentally wrong with his design. It just wasn't the set and traits for him.
Yeah, I think also like in this specific patch, nerfing Lulu and Veigar, as we'll talk about going down, it probably just hurt the Elderwood comp, which is kind of like his only real composition. Um, and I think that maybe have just kind of like offset each other and made that Hecarim comp just the same, which is not very good. So it just wasn't very good.
Yep. All right. Yeah. Speaking of Lulu, really big Lulu nerf. 30 mana on a champion, which is pretty big in terms of nerfs. How you feeling about that one? Post looking back at it.
Yeah, I mean, at first, so when we were making the nerf, I was nervous because that's a big nerf. When we do nerfs like this can usually take a character from like being good to being quite bad in history of us doing these kind of changes with mana. At first, I thought it was an over nerf. I was scared about that, but looking at the data and watching her, she still seems like she has a place in her compositions and still providing quite a bit of value. So it worked, and I'm glad. I'm glad, Kenton and you and all of our players were really hounding us for this one. 'Cause I think she was really that crazy. It's kind of blows my mind how powerful she got from those changes, but it was a lot.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah. It's the kind of thing like we could nickel and dime ourselves and be like, should it have been 140 instead of 150? Maybe, but like honestly, the game was probably healthier for it, just so that we didn't end up in those infinite Lulu situations. So the way our mana system works with damage taken. So, all right,
Yeah.
Teemo. We nerfed the chosen version from mana to spell power, and we nerfed 2-star damage. I'm going to just go ahead and say it. This seems like a slam dunk. I think the big mess up here was that Teemo, when we launched, was a utility champion. He was never meant to do damage, which is why it was okay that he had the chosen mana stat as a thing. We usually don't give that to carries. Then when we did that buff, I forget exactly which patch it was, 1022 or 1023, where we did that buff where we buffed Teemo. That is where the mistake was. We should have at that point made this kind of change because now he just became kind of an abrasive carry. So this kind of put him back into a healthier spot. Still strong, kind of not what he was originally designed to do, but kind of interesting. So
Yeah, I mean he's still definitely prominent. I think we went on to notch these numbers, maybe some of these numbers a little bit more down, even in the next upcoming patch.
yeah,
So there was obviously even a little more room. He still seems to be quite powerful when you get him early on, and yeah, I mean I think the chosen stat stuff. It's weird because I remember looking at the new data and like he definitely went down quite a bit, but I hear from players all the time that they still enjoy grabbing him when they see him. So
yeah. There's something about seeing your opponent's attacks all miss. The fact that it's both offense and defense that I think makes him stand out from a feeling standpoint. But yeah, like you said, data-wise, he's no longer the top 2-cost chosen. So
yep.
Cool. Callista plus 100 health. Thoughts?
Oh yeah, this brought her to S tier, right? S tier, S tier.
Yeah, everyone's a Callista main now.
It's an interesting experiment. I mean, this is something that Kent was really interested in pursuing. I think sometimes doing these kinds of experiments helps us, learn if this actually makes a difference. And honestly, I didn't look at the data very carefully, but at least in gameplay wise, it doesn't seem like it really changed much at all.
Yep.
She can take maybe an extra hit, but like honestly, most of the time she's getting hit by something, she's probably going to kill her anyways. And so I think really at the end of the day, if a carry is a carry, and they're not doing their carry work, we have to just actually give them the carry power to do what they need to do. And in the next patch, you'll see we actually ended up giving Callista a buff and hear lots of whispers of how strong she may or may not be.
My hope is in the future we can get Callista to a point where like you get it out of an orb in 2-1 and you're like actually excited about it, kind of like you are with Kindred or Shyvana in 4.5. So still have some room to go there for sure. But like you said, small steps, right? Because the worst case would be, we buff her damage 2% and all of a sudden she's every carry and she, we don't want that situation. So definitely agree with the baby steps method here. So
yeah, I think Callista's also a little special in that because she's a percent health character, damage character. She's technically scales pretty well and with the game time, and so she's just a weird character because I know she's also strong in slow fights where you can get those spears up really high, which is like in the early game, but then I don't know.
Yeah,
she's got a really weird scaling. Scaling on it.
Okay, Veigar. I want to give some history on this one real quick. So Veigar was probably OP to very OP in 1024 or 1025. And I also was getting like sick of him in our playtests of 4.5 to the point where it was like there were Veigars every game. Elderwood was doing well with their new features. So I got sick of it and I put in a massive buff onto PBE, which was the mana to 70. which you were concerned was an over nerf, and turns out you were correct. But as a testing ground, we did this. We did the light version, so we were like, let's do the light version so that we can see the light version and the heavy version, and we can see which one of those is closer to the reality we want, and then pivot both into that version. I think that tactic was really cool and really correct, so I'm glad we did this. And it turns out the 55 mana was the correct one, and so now we know that, and so it can stay that way for 11.2. So
Yeah, I think we won't always necessarily have that opportunity, right? Because
yep.
we often aren't playing like two versions of TFT and we're just on one, and we have to kind of make a call one way or the other. And I think, yeah, I think we talked about this last time, but Veigar is just a very special kind of character, and that that scaling from previous combats is just like this. It's this really hard thing to grasp because it just doesn't feel very fair when you run up against a Veigar who's like so stacked, and you're like,
yeah,
well, I didn't feed this Veigar, but I lose. So one of those guys that I think is very controversial because he's fun and he's got. I know for sure like Giovanni's loved the design of this, and I do too. It's just so hard to balance this and not have it just be really, really scary and the strongest thing in the game if we don't tune it right. So
yep. All right, Aatrox. Aatrox got the HP up and the armor way up. I think this was just a slam dunk. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this was stuff that Mort was already exploring when he was doing some of the changes for 4.5 for Aatrox, just trying to bring him into being an actual like 4-cost threat. And we only took a portion of what you were doing, I think, and there was still like a spell damage change that was sitting on 4.5 that we didn't put onto here because we were scared. We don't want to rock the boat too much on this patch. But yeah, I think Aatrox now feels a lot just tankier when you put him in. Whether it's at 1 or 2 star, he actually feels like he can actually sit in the front line a lot harder, and that helps a lot of his comps and helps him get off that one cast, which is honestly sometimes all he needs to be a huge impact in a fight, right? Pulling the carries out of the position is just like game winning in so many scenarios. So
yeah, like I said, glad we made these changes. The damage changes that are coming in 4.5 also feel pretty good. I'm glad we didn't make those changes to live, especially because there's one argument I could see that these changes were incorrect, and that is the power of it plus the next one we'll talk about here, which was Ahri. Giving Aatrox and Ahri the Vanguard Mystic comp both buffs might have been probably the one like kind of big blunder this patch. Looking at Ahri, and I'm going to take the fault on this one because here's the way it went down. We had the Ahri. We knew Ahri was the worst 4-cost carry in 1025. She had the worst rate of all the carries of the 4-cost carries. So we're like, we got to buff Ahri. And you were like, okay, let's go light. And let's do the mana 0 out of 80 to 0 out of 75. Like, that was it. And we had that discussion where we're like, is that going to be enough? Is that going to do anything? I don't know. And then I fell bait to actually, it was Mean Mr. Keen's tweet, where he had that graph that was like, should you play Ahri? I don't have perfect items. No. I do have perfect items. No. And it was like, if she's so bad that all the challengers are saying don't play her, maybe she needs a little more. So then you gave her the extra attack speed. That's probably where, that was probably the mistake in my book.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of, like, Kent and I were also just debating this a lot because Kent's run through the Ahri numbers really intently. He has a spreadsheet literally just to, like, calculate how does she do against different types of compositions of Mystic 2, Mystic 4, and whatnot. And we just couldn't find buffs to Ahri that didn't feel like they would do much or push her way too far over the edge because she's really a threshold champion. Like if she one-shots your team consistently, she just does it. So I do think the big mistake, like kind of going back to what you said, Mort, is just like sometimes we don't need to make changes because the other things are changing around a character, right? Like you're saying, Aatrox is just more impactful, and so obviously Vanguard Mystics are stronger, and that's kind of Ahri's main composition. We kind of just needed to do nothing, and Bottle would have been fine. And so that's one of the big things that I think it's really hard for me to just keep remembering. Is like sometimes if something is struggling, maybe it's just because the pieces around it aren't there yet. And that's something that we need to take into account a lot better in this scenario. I still remember when we first just put only the mana change in, we thought we were just going to get memed to death, because it's like 5 mana, lol.
Yeah.
But it might actually have made.
I think it might have been enough. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, kind of regret doing Ari at all, honestly, a little bit, because but she's going by, so I think maybe it's fine.
Yeah, it's a good goodbye for her. Like I said, I think the mana change was correct. I think the attack speed one is the one that we always underestimate how much a 0.05 attack speed buff can do to a champion. I think that's just a common mistake we keep making, and we got to get better at. Remember the Zed one, where it was just like, oh, it turns out 0.05 attack speed is a lot of power. So
for sure.
Cool. So yeah, and by the way, the other thing too is, like, I know challenger players are complaining about Ari, but data wise, she didn't look that insane, right?
Yeah, she didn't look that insane at all, really. She looked kind of like just normal, but I think partly is because, she does kind of spike towards the end of the game when boards are really full, and she's basically getting like tons of damage on like so many units. If you look at her data, it tends to like go up really aggressively towards the end, as well as just Vanguard Mystics in general, because they have so much AoE CC to back that up. So I think that's the part that's a little bit harder to grok, is like Ari is really oppressive, but maybe it's only in the last stage or so, and that's kind of like the hard thing to understand there. I would also say, like, even before these buffs, you're right that she was the weakest forecast carry, but it wasn't like a horribly large she wasn't super underpowered by any stretch of the imagination. So I think that's maybe where I don't know, that's why I say maybe I regret just even trying to like buff Ari at all, because it wasn't really that far off if she was off, So.
Makes sense. Jin 2 nerf seems like a slam dunk to me. As far as I know, in the data he was still good.
Yeah, I think he's still going out on a pretty high note, and I mean, the number hopefully wasn't too much of a difference. I think Jin still hits really hard, and he still seemed strong in the compositions that he was meant to be in. So
nice. Okay, Morgana. This was probably the biggest change of the patch, where she got a bunch of HP, a bunch of armor, but lost an attack range. And certainly it didn't seem like now all of a sudden we're seeing Morgana comps or Enlightened comps or anything like that on live. This is also a bit of a play to 4.5 to get her ready for 4.5 and siphon her comps. But this to me just seems like it was good but did nothing to live. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think this is one of those like reverse of what we had with the Veigar, where it was like, hey, we have time to kind of like experiment in both of these patches at once, basically the new 4.5 and then this final patch of the first half of the set, and we just tried something kind of off the wall, and like it definitely fits her a lot better in the new set, I think, than it does for her here. So I don't know if it's good or bad, but it was a thing we did.
I know in 1025 she was the lowest of all the forecasts. Was that still true in the data for 11.1?
No, she actually this actually was a buff to her. Yeah, she got closer into the band, and the forecast band was like really tight, and which is really good for us to see. So it was a buff to her overall, but it probably just didn't meaningfully move the needle enough on the comps that she was playing for her to feel like she was part of the meta. But 4.5 has a lot of opportunities.
The good news there, though, is again, like, as long as it was a buff and general upward trend, then it sounds like it was the right call. Because again, we don't want to like turn it into a Morgana meta. So
yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
Lee Sin armor and MR buff.
Yeah, I didn't do much. I think Lee Sin is similar to like the way we're talking about Ari. Like, he's the weakest 5 cost by our data, but it's not by a terrible amount. He's the weakest one, and then I thought maybe we could just give him a survivability buff so he can stay on the front line a little bit easier and get his kicks off. But it really just didn't do that much. Like, we could have probably done a little bit more, and we will do more. So you'll see in 4.5. So
nice. All right, then from there, some general bug fixes. Nothing too crazy. I think the Yone bug fix was probably the biggest one, just so that he wasn't quite shredding as much. But again, these are all bug fixes, so obviously we should have done them, and that's good we did, so sweet.
Yone is still good.
Yeah. So
still real good.
Cool. So generally, like I said, we took a small approach to the patch, and I think other than the Ari Aatrox combo, that was probably the only questionable call looking back on this. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think, well, I mean, just to bring up one last thing is like it felt like Ninja, like Zed, basically kind of came back up as a really strong strategy near the end of this cycle too, and we didn't really do anything about that per se, and that's something that I think is a fair call out if someone wanted to. It's really hard for us to like really make sure that like everything's going to be exactly the way we want it. And that's like pre-nerfing Zed or something that just feels like it would have been like 5 brain. Like I just
Yeah.
honestly would have never thought that he would have become such a strong option again, without us having done anything besides nerf other different compositions, and so
Yeah, basically nerfing Veigar allowed for Zed to be more successful. Is basically what it comes down to. So
yeah.
cool. Okay, so yeah, so that's it for Fates. Not too bad. And then obviously this Thursday, 4.5 Festival of Beasts comes out, so that should be fun. Any closing thoughts on Fates?
No, I mean I think Fates. I hope everyone enjoyed Fates as much as we enjoyed working on it, because I think it's actually been a pretty fun one to work on as a designer. It's just a lot of fun things to do, and I feel like we were able to like deliver a lot of cool experiences and different fantasies for the characters, and hopefully we can keep delivering even more in the next patch. So.
All right, one question before we go. What champ are you going to miss the
Yeah.
most?
Personally, me is Riven, just because I designed her, and I feel like she just has a really like. I play her more flexibly than other people. I know by the end of this set, and people were just itemizing her like a tank basically every fight. But I liked putting like blue buff and like AP items on her, and I just had a lot of fun playing her. So, what about you,
Yeah,
Mort?
yeah, Riven certainly came into her own. Riven was almost my answer, but since you took it, I'll actually say Lilia.
Aha.
I think Lilia has always been the, and forgive the pun
Ooh.
here, I think she's been the sleeper champion. She's been like secretly really, really
Oh.
strong and underappreciated, and I really loved her for that because it allowed me to kind of use her a lot and climb really well with her. So cool,
Goodbye to Dusk.
nice. All right, so yeah, that's gonna do it for this time. Our next patch postmortem will be Festival of Beast stuff, so that'll be pretty crazy. So cool. All right,
Let's hope
until
it's
next.
not crazy.
True. Let's hope it's a nice, balanced, happy meta. No Samiras everywhere. Nothing crazy like that. So,
Uh-oh.
hint, hint.
Preparing my brain, just massaging it.
Yeah, yeah. All right, that's gonna do it. Until next time, take it easy.